three, go.
I'm Neiland Fain, it's my wife Sherry Fain, and we several years took a leap of faith going to work with Texas Baptist Men Builders Group. We're members of First Baptist Church in LLano. Sherry was born and raised here, and I married her here and then carried her off to the hinterlands for several years, and then we brought her back home. And we first got interested in Texas Baptist Men Builders back many, many years ago. We were living down in the Rio Grande Valley, and one of the deacons in our church was telling us about an experience that he had. He was one of the first group to go out and build a church building for the Texas Baptist Men. And I was asking him about it because I've always had an interest in building and doing carpenter work and working with my hands. And he was telling us what a great experience they had building this church. And there's a bunch of volunteers from several different areas, and it was helping a church that was financially strapped, that they could buy the materials, but they could not pay for labor for building a building. And so a group of men got together and formed Texas Baptist Men and went up there and built a church building. And Sherry and I were in that building here about 3 years ago. One of our members died, and his funeral was held in that building, the first building that was built. But that piqued my interest, but I was only in my late 30s at the time when he was telling me about this. And
caught Neiland's attention, but it didn't catch mine at all. It was kind of right over the head.
But I kept thinking about that. And so we went along with my career in the oil field and working and moving from place to place to place.
Whole bunch.
And heard nothing about the Texas Baptist Men Builders Group. And when I was right at 60 years old, our company went through a reorganization, and I was laid off. And the oil field was in the severe downturn at the time, and couldn't find a job. And so I was looking for something to do. And this kept coming back to me, Texas Baptist Men Builders. I wonder where we'd find out. And our Sunday school teacher at the time, Daddy, was working with the Texas Baptist Men with what they call the camp builders, building a seminary in Canada.
If we could go to Canada, I was ready to join. It's on my bucket list.
But we began trying to find out about the Texas Baptist Men, what we do, how we do it, and I couldn't find out any information. Finally, I was talking to Tom Fain, my cousin here, and he said, "Well, you need to call Vance Oney, who was a member of this church
At that time.
And we're getting ready to build a building, and Texas Baptist Men are going to build it." So we were not living here at the time, but that was our first job, was to come and build this building we're in right now, build out the insides of it.
Of course, it was my home church, so I was just thrilled to be here.
But I enjoy doing carpenter work. I started out working as a carpenter, or with carpenters, and I enjoyed that a bunch. I did that for several years.
As a child.
Well, and
youngster, really.
And then as we began working with Texas Baptist Men, worked many jobs. We were working on a large church down out of Seguin, and the electricians were needing some help. And they said, "We need some people to help pull wire and run the conduit and so on." And so I said, "Well, I'll be glad to do that," because I wanted to learn more about the electrical end of it. So since then, I've been doing mainly electrical work, but when there's no electrical work to be done, I still work as a carpenter. And that's how we got started, briefly what I do.
One of the interesting things about all that was he asked Vance Oney when Tom Fain told him to talk to the Oneys, said, "What do I do?" And Vance said, "Just show up." And Neiland thought, well, that was a little vague. That didn't tell him the information he needed, what he needed to take, how things worked. And he asked Vance again, and Vance said, just show up. Do I need to bring all my tools? What do I need to bring? Just show up. Bring your square and your hammer and your your apron, carpenter apron, or whatever they call it. We got quite a kick out of that. Just show up.
So we pulled up in front of the building out here, and they took us out to the campground and
That was an experience.
helped us get set up on camp. That was our first job, to see how it was. And we had a lot of people on this job. And you asked the question, how old was I at the time? Well, I was right at 60. And started working with the group.
And we were the babes in the group back then, if you can believe that now, looking at us.
And so here we are, 81, and still working with this group. We're no longer the babes, we're the old fellers in the group. And so we worked on 43 different projects in our years because of the health situation, not only with us, with our parents and so on. There are lots of times we were not able to go. But we worked in a various number of places, and we've had several very interesting experiences in working with this group. And one of them,
Tell about Colorado.
one of them, they had a job come up in Colorado, and they were needing just a few people to go up into Colorado, in Mount Crested Butte, Colorado. And so I called them and told them I would be available if we had a place in Pagosa Springs at the time, and we'd be halfway there. They said, we got a full crew, we don't need you. And Saturday afternoon, or Sunday afternoon, the phone rang, and this fellow said, this is Dee. I said, Dee who? I didn't know, but I knew his son. And he says, I understand you want to come up here to Mount Crested Butte and work. I said, well, we offered to say you had full crew. Well, come on, can you be here tomorrow? So Sherry and I packed up the car and headed to Mount Crested Butte. And we were working on a house that had been given to the Baptist General Convention by a finance company that they had repossessed. It was about at that time, about $1.5 million house.
Fancy, according to anything I'd ever seen lived in before.
And we stayed in the house while we were working on it. It had been vacant for about 2 or 3 years, and it needed a lot of maintenance work because of the weather conditions in that area. So that was an interesting.
And it was right on the ski slope. And you could look out in the afternoons and see deer on the slope right behind the wall that was enclosed the yard for the backyard for the house. Quite an experience, quite interesting.
And then we have built churches, and we built other structures. We built a structure down in Rockport that the local churches had gone together down there to take care of providing food and
Help for medical aid.
Help for medical aid, and they were working out of a little old house that's over 100 years old, literally had holes in the floor she had to walk around.
Rats could come and go, so keeping food there to help the community was almost an impossibility unless it was very thoroughly contained.
So we went down there and we built a little over 3,000 square foot building for that service to the community. And the thing that really made it great was there were 13 churches that were involved in this. And one day we'd eat with the Methodists, the next day we'd eat with the Presbyterians, the next day we'd eat with the Catholics, the next day and so.
Let me interrupt him there to say that the one thing that the church we work on has to do, it's part of the agreement made initially, is that they have to feed the men and their wives lunch. And so it's not that the women stay home in the mornings and prepare the noon meal because they know they're going to be taken care of. Therefore, in the mornings, we have usually a Bible study led by one particular person for that time away from home. And frequently that's a combination of verbal teaching and the CDs, can't think of the right word, the videos. And it's usually very interesting. Of course, it's on a Christian book, which helps to build us up while the men are out building.
The wives furnish another very vital part of our ministry, in that we old men are tired. We come in the afternoon, and sometimes we just barely make it into the trailer, but they soothe us and massage us and encourage us and give us the encouragement that we need to continue on.
I thought you were going to talk about snacks. You left that out entirely. And the women prepare those snacks.
The women prepare a snack for us in mid-morning and mid-afternoon, which we look forward to that time. And
they draw apart and come into usually the area where we've eaten lunch, or will eat lunch, because they have a morning snack plus an afternoon snack. And that usually consists of fruit, some kind of crackers and peanut butter or cheese, that kind of thing, plus sometimes they're choice drinks, sometimes you want coffee or you want hot chocolate, and so that's rather interesting, and it takes several women to make that happen each morning and each afternoon.
And you asked the question, what are some of the challenges we face? One of the challenges is to work in doctor's appointments and other things that we do, because when we go generally for 2 weeks. And so we're out away from our home base for 2 weeks.
You may be far away, and you might not be so far away, but what you can leave early one morning and be back either that afternoon or the next morning. But there are other times we're too far away. That's not a possibility. And in that case, the way the trailers are parked, ordinarily we just have barely room for a slide out or for the door to open. We're just jam-packed into this place because of the temporary electrical hookups, the temporary water hookups, that the guys have the equipment that they put on the trailer and unroll, and then come time to leave, they roll that back up, which is a lot of work to put on that trailer. And so that's one interesting part. And we always have a washing machine. It will be cold water only, and there will be a line standing at the washing machine, even if you get up and go out there at 6 a.m. That washing machine is, I mean, you're there for 2 weeks. Are you going to hand wash some undies or something like that? Or you're going to be able to pack for 2 weeks? So that washing machine, we take care of our washing machine guy.
As another challenge that we face is weather. We build in all kinds of weather. We have built during the summertime when it's so hot that we'd have to take a cool down break pretty frequently to keep from overheating and having a heat stroke or something that way. That becomes a challenge.
Also, at least once, I think maybe twice, when we were working in the summer, they were depending upon to give energy, not a compressor per se. What am I trying to say?
Generator.
Generator, that's the word. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And the generator went down. And those trailers in the summer, if they don't have that cool air going, they heat up like you're in a sardine can. And so nobody could stay in their trailer.
We were blessed on one job where that happened. It had a generator that was less than reliable running our camp. But the church owned a building right next to where our camp was, which was air conditioned. So everybody could go over into the air conditioned building and recuperate. Another challenge is wet weather. If we're building from the slab up, well then if it rains, then we can't do anything until the rain stops. If we're building in, like this building, we have the metal building already built. We're inside, we're under cover, but we've worked on some jobs where the high temperature was maybe 30 degrees, and that gets to be cold when you have no source of heat. So that's one of the challenges.
Or if you're just meeting in a tent that's been temporarily set up and it gets cold and it's wet. Oh, you grab your food and you go back to your trailer when that's possible, and it's usually possible
But
to do that.
another challenge, personally, is Sherry's a flower lover. And she has to go off and leave all of her flowers for 2 weeks without water. So we have secure somebody to go by and water the plants and so on and forth. So that's one of the challenges.
And that's an expense because naturally we pay her because I have a lot of flowers that I don't want to lose.
The Texas Baptist Man does not furnish us any help on transportation. We furnish our own transportation to and from the jobs, and
you're speaking financially.
financially, and so that's part of one of the challenges is to have the money to like our next planned job is going to be right close to 400 miles from here. And
Right
so-
on the Louisiana border.
So we don't, that's the fuel, but that is part of our giving back to the Lord, is doing this out of our own pockets. And people ask me, well, why do you do this? It's hard to describe the joy that I get, and I think Sherry will go along with this to me.
It's a passion.
It's a passion, but you're serving the Lord, and you see some results of what you're doing.
And the people you go to have are so excited, they can just hardly wait to come out and walk through the building. Oh, y'all didn't have that done last time. Walls are already up in here? Ooh, that's amazing. You guys are talented.
But we do it for the joy of serving the Lord and serving our fellow man. And we have a chance to witness at times. On one job, I don't know how long you want me to talk. On one job, some of the crew got there on Saturday before the job began on Monday, and this fella needed a haircut, so he asked, was there a barber shop in town? Yeah, there's a barber shop down there, told him where it was. And he went down there and he had to wait in line, sitting there in the chair, and he's reading his newspaper.
This is a TBM member.
And this barber was cutting the hair of a teenager. And the barber asked the teenager, says, what are you doing this summer? He said, well, I'm going on a mission trip. And the boy says, and the barber says, what is a mission trip? And the young man started trying to explain to him a little bit about what their youth group was doing on the mission trip. And so as he was explaining that, and he said, well, while we're talking about that, what are all those trailers doing down there by the First Baptist Church? He said, well, a group of Texas Baptist men has come in, and they're going to convert the old Ford dealership that was across the street into educational space for our church. And he said, well, how much did they pay? And the young boy said, well, as I understand it, they don't get paid anything. They just come and do it. The barber said, well, nothing but a blank fool would work for nothing. And Ken said, I was sitting over here reading my newspaper, and so when I got up to get in the chair, he said, I don't know you. Ken introduced himself, and he says, I'm one of those fools that work for nothing. So that barber dropped the apron and walked back in the back for a few minutes, came back out and apologized. But before the week was over, he was converted.
Isn't that a race story?
And
Hallelujah.
So you never know when the opportunity will be provided. And
One thing the women do, you may be wondering, well, what do the women do while the men are out building? A few of the women do work with the men. We have a lady who can paint, she can hang sheetrock, she can tape and float. She's just pretty talented.
an electrician.
And helps as an electrician. She's just multi-talented. She says, I'm torn between whether to go to the Bible study with the women or to get out there and work with the men. So I try to kind of half and half it. So I get a little bit of both. And so that's one of the things that if a woman wants to. Now the original guy who started this thought the women's place was not out where the men were working. And so it started off, no women worked. But one by one, and now we have 3 or 4 at least, that like to help the men with that work. So they kind of divide their time between the Bible study or book study relating to the Bible. And that's sort of interesting.
One of the things that we do, if we're building a church especially, is we offer to hold we're there for 2 weeks. The middle Sunday, we start on a job on Monday and then we end on a Saturday. The middle Sunday, we take the service at the church if the pastor is agreeable, and one of our men will preach, some of our people will give testimonies, the women will fill the choir loft, and they have some specials that they sing. And then on Sunday night, the men get up there and sing. And but that is another high point. Not all the churches we can do that, but we do on some. And we don't always just build churches. This next job coming up this month is building a pregnancy center over in East Texas for pregnant women that have no other place to go. But it's a not-for-profit. It's a ministry started by somebody, and so we're going to go and help in that situation.
And then coming up in January, the prison in Burnett. I didn't even know Burnett had a prison to begin with.
We will build, as soon as they get their money together, we will be building a chapel building at the women's prison in Burnett.
And COVID has had an impact on
our schedule.
In their collection of money to have the money to furnish the materials to build it. But the plan is, which I think is interesting, if the building was going to be inside the prison fence, the men would have to surrender all of their billfold, all of that kind of stuff. Cell phones each morning when they went in, and collect it again each evening when they came out. But they worked it out so that the men are going to be building outside the fence, and then after they have done the building, they will fence that area too. And that's a mission project in itself, and that this is a prison that has a very low recidivism. I have trouble with that word, recidivism. Is that the word?
Recidivism rate.
Something like that. From that particular prison is very low because it's one of the last places a woman prisoner might go before she's released back out into the real world again. And so they have started teaching practical things that she needs to know, how to dress for an interview, how to apply for a job, how to get along in the real world. And so there's certain of those classes that the women most especially want to take before they get back out. And so there's a need for more classroom space, and it is non-existent the way the prison is built now.
We will be building that building. It will have a chapel in it that will house, I think, about 250 to 300 people. They have 600 inmates in that prison, and their chaplain seeks to give them spiritual training during this time, and they seem to be lining up right now. He does not have room to minister to the ones, so that's part of the joy we get out of seeing that we've had a little part in helping in a situation like that.
A variety of situations. They're never the same. 2 jobs are never the same, partly because of the understandable part that there are different buildings and different situations. But another one is that you never have, excuse me, the same crew, exactly the same crew, showing up for each job. If there's an illness in the family, if there's an important doctor visit, those people don't go to that job, but they'll go to the next job, but somebody else won't be able to go. And so it's never exactly the same people. But there is such a camaraderie between those men. You can hear them shouting sometimes if you're outside. And they're shouting jokes, or they're shouting encouragement, or they're applauding something that somebody did that was the first time for that person. These men are not builders by trade. I don't know if they have.
We've only got one or two that were builders by trade. But one of the joys of doing this is it's a clean environment. We don't have the cussing and the smoking and the off-color jokes and stuff like that going on.
Are very few disagreements. And Neiland can tell a story about one where two men got a little bit crossways, and everybody heard it. And the next morning at their devotional, which they have a 30-minute devotional before they go to work, the next morning at devotional, the guys apologized to each other and to the group.
So and we're called on to do some things we've never done before at times, and but everybody nobody is looked down on because they don't have a skill, but we put them with somebody that can work and show them and teach them, and that's how I got really into the electrical end of it. They took me under their wing and started showing me what to do and how to do it and why we do it. And we seek to build buildings, not only just to have a building, but we seek to do it right.
In the finest manner possible. As an education minister of ours used to say about anything you do it in the finest manner possible, he would say, and that stuck with me.
Sherry and I lived next to a little encampment down in the valley for a while that a bunch of volunteers had come in to build buildings and do repair work.
Without training from the previous people who'd been there. They just kind of come in and, well, let's see, we might build on this building over here.
But there were some big messes down there in that. But our group, we seek to build everything exactly to code. And you get into the building codes and electrical codes, and that can get pretty complex. But so that we have something to be proud of when we walk off from it.
When we give it to the Lord.
And one of the questions you asked was, how long do we plan to do this? I don't know. I told Sherry the last job we were on, after the first day I could hardly get back to the trailer. I was tired and sore.
Stiff.
But about the third day I said, well, maybe I can continue on, but it makes me aware that with my age that I may not be able to continue it much longer, but my heart will always be there.
That's good. Outstanding. And that was going to be the question that I asked is why you're going to keep going. And so that was, the heart was there. And so that's great. Super. All right. We are golden.